Hi, welcome to another episode of Luncheonette with Laura Diaz. That's me, and I'm really excited to bring you a super important topic today. We're going to be talking to you about sexual abuse, and I know that's something that many of us deal with the children that are placed in our home. But first, I've got a few announcements I'd like to cover. We've got one super exciting piece of news, and I'm sure some of you have already heard about it, but we've been waiting to announce this. If you remember back in our first episode of this season, we went over the normalcy bill legislation that was going out with Alan Abramowitz. Well, that legislation has passed the House, and we have gotten the news that Governor Rick Scott is going to be signing that bill during our advocacy day in Tallahassee during the press conference. So how exciting that we're going to have a whole lot of foster parents up there meeting with legislators and actually seeing that piece of legislation get signed. So super exciting for foster parents. I hope you've seen the articles, and tune back in and check out that episode if you haven't. We kind of go over some of the details of it. So it's great news for foster parents, and it's something that we here at QPI have been working on for a long time. Also, as a reminder, we've got a couple of great conferences coming up. One of them is the National Foster Care Conference. That's going to be held in Clearwater Beach, May the 29th through the 31st. And piggybacking on that is going to be the Adoption Conference, also there at Clearwater, which is May the 30th through June 1st. And that's called Making a Difference in Adoption. Then in August, the 27th through the 30th, there's going to be the National Independent Living Conference. It's called Growing Pains 2013. So for any of those of you that are out there working with teens, this will be a great conference for you to attend. We're going to post the links to these conferences on the site, so take a look. There's more detailed information, and if we can be of any further service in sharing that information, just let us know here at QPI. Okay, with that being said, I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Deidre Knapp, and she's going to have a discussion with me about sexual abuse. Hi, Dr. Knapp.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and how you've come to work with those who have been sexually abused?
Yes, and first, thank you for having me. I got my doctorate at Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale, and while I was in school, I really focused on working with children because that had always been my love. And for my internship year, I ended up working at a company that really specialized in working with kids who were sexually abused. So that became my path. And I learned a lot about sexual abuse, and I also worked with a lot of kids who were in the foster care system, some of whom I helped get successfully adopted, and others of whom we worked very, very hard on getting them reunified with their biological families. In September, I joined Jarena and Associates, where I am now, and I'm now the program director of two programs that address sexual acting out. Because as we know, a lot of our kids who are sexually abused become reactive and start abusing others or try to make sense of what happened to them.
Well, that's great. You know, as a foster parent myself and working with foster parents all the time, that's one of the things that is always on our mind. You know, when we get a new placement, sometimes we're told they've been victims of sexual abuse. Other times that information isn't known. So maybe if you can give some foster parents some idea of some of the things they should be looking for to help determine if there are some needs for maybe therapy or help with somebody who was possibly sexually abused.
Okay. Well, and also one thing to note is that kids who act out sexually may not have been sexually abused. They more frequently will even come from families where there was a lot of domestic violence. So sometimes you'll have someone sexually acting out with no sexual abuse allegations in their past. So that's also something to look out for. But some warning signs are if they are touching themselves a lot in public places, if they're constantly trying to touch other kids, be alone with other kids, if you tell them to stop, let's say, touching themselves in the living room and they continue to do it regardless of how many times you redirect them, that is one of our warning signs. Also, if they try to touch an adult's private parts or try to get too close to an adult all the time, or if they're trying to get younger ones to constantly be alone with, that's something that concerns us.
Okay, that's good information to know. What would you say are some normal childhood behaviors? Because a lot of times kids do things naturally that we could kind of consider sort of sexualized behaviors versus something that would be maybe symptomatic of either exposure, like you said, to domestic violence or maybe things in the home observing or possible sexual abuse.
That is a great question, and actually, Tony Cavanon-Johnson goes into a lot of research on what is appropriate versus inappropriate. And you're right, many kids will start to explore their sexuality even at young ages. Even as young, in utero, they're showing that boys, for example, get erections. And even after birth, there is a lot of sensation seeking, and young children will sometimes even touch their own private parts, and that is all completely normal. It's normal for even in kindergarten where they want to play boyfriend and girlfriend or mommy and daddy and reenact what they're seeing with the adults in their lives. We get concerned when there is any type of continued engagement, if a little girl is constantly trying to kiss the other little boy in the foster home, and you keep telling her not to, and she keeps persisting. We get very concerned when you have adult type sexual activity, if it actually progresses to oral sex or vaginal sex. We get concerned if there's a huge power differential, if a child who's set to babysit is now in power or in charge of younger kids and they're acting out, because normal is more two similar age peers trying to kiss, or I'll show me yours if you show me mine. That's more normal. And when they're caught and the parent says, that's not okay to do, they stop. It's not normal when they keep trying. It's also not normal when there's force involved or any type of aggressive act. We get very concerned if within whatever occurs, the person who initiated it, the child says, don't tell anyone, or if you tell anyone, I'm going to beat you up. Any kind of force, or if there's force used during the act where they hold someone down to touch them, that's not normal, and that concerns us.
Okay, that's good to know. What would you suggest for us? Let's say we have, a biological child, maybe adopted child in the home with a foster child, or even multiple foster children, and we have a child who's maybe kind of showing some of these signs. We're not sure if this is some normal behavior, but we want to really take the necessary precautions to protect both the other children in the home, that child from potential allegations, and ourselves. What are some safety plans and things that we could put into place as foster parents?
Safety planning, I think, is great across the board, just as a precautionary measure, because you don't know every detail of the history of the kids you have in your home. But definitely making sure that older kids are not left in charge of younger ones. You want to make sure you have supervision. Supervision isn't just, okay, you're in the kitchen and you're making dinner and they're all playing and you can kind of, look around the door into the family room and see them. Supervision really means having the child in the room with you so you can see fully what they're doing at all times. Of course, if you know for sure a child is acting out, then you want to be much more vigilant in your supervision. You also sometimes, in cases where there are verified acting out, we might have monitors in the rooms. Sometimes we use baby monitors. We also sometimes use door alarms at night so that if a door gets open in the middle of the night, it beeps and ideally wakes you up so that you're aware that the child we're concerned about is coming out of their room for some reason. We also want to make sure they're getting the right treatment and working with the therapist on good touch and bad touch and boundaries and addressing all of their victimization in the past.
That's good information. What do you suggest as far as if the child discloses some information to us, and sometimes it may seem very far-fetched, but or they're talking about things maybe that have happened in the past, what do you kind of recommend to a foster parent in how to handle that situation?
You definitely want to let them know that this is a safe place to talk about those things. If they're disclosing in front of other children, though, we also want to balance that with not victimizing the other children by being now privy to these sometimes very upsetting details. So you might encourage the child to talk with you later about it in private. Depending on what they share with you, you might need to make an abuse report, because we want to make sure we're erring on the side of caution of protecting these children. And if they are disclosing something that has never been reported before, we don't want to ask a whole lot of questions at first, because at least in Broward County, and I'm guessing it's similar in the state, but you can always check with your local rules. If it's an actual sexual abuse allegation, you don't want the child to be interviewed more than 3 times if it's something that needs to be investigated. So you might, let them tell you the basics, not ask a lot of questions, not ask a lot of digging questions or leading questions. A leading question, if a child says somebody touched me, a leading question is saying, oh, did Aunt Mary touch you? Because now that is giving them someone who you're expecting an answer for. You're giving them information essentially in your question. So you want to ask, very open questions and then really minimal questions before making that abuse report and letting the authorities handle it, at least initially.
Well, I think you may have already partially answered this, but I want to read a question that came in, and thank you to a viewer who had sent this in. We do solicit our viewers for questions for our upcoming episodes, and so a viewer sent in this question. I know you've kind of touched on it, but I'll go over it in case you'd like to add something to it. And the question says, is it possible to briefly go over the rules of interviewing, for example, the laws, policy, procedures, etc.? And there is a lot of confusion over allegation, how many times and how the child can be interviewed. The difference between interview and conversation when the child discloses after an investigation and wants to talk versus calling in abuse. So, and of course the viewer is writing, understanding, of course, it's always better to err on the side of caution. So how could you respond to that question?
I would encourage you to check with your own particular county's laws and rules. But my understanding, at least in Broward, again, they don't want children interviewed more than 3 times. So when an abuse report gets called into the hotline and the child protective investigator arrives at the home, if the child indicates that they were a victim of sexual abuse, they stop interviewing the child and they call for a detective, and often the child is brought actually to a sexual assault treatment center, and then they are interviewed during a forensic interview by a trained professional. So if a child is disclosing to you sexual abuse, you really don't want to initially ask very many questions. It's one thing to say, tell me more what happened. And then once you have enough information that you can really make an abuse report on, you don't want to keep questioning. Children, they've done studies especially after 3 or 4 times of being questioned, may start to change their story. Children also are very susceptible to wanting to please the person who's asking them the question. So if they feel that you want them to confirm or answer a certain way, they might start giving you answers that are not 100% truthful anymore. Whereas when they are just coming out with it on their own, they're much more likely to be telling the truth. After, though, an investigation has occurred, the child might still want to talk about it, and doing so, with their therapist is wonderful. Sharing things about it with the foster parent, because they see the foster parent so much more frequently than they see the therapist, can be very helpful. And more than helping them rehash the details is just letting them know they're safe now. But kids might want to talk about it quite a bit because they don't know how to handle what's happened to them. So did I answer it?
I think you did a great job. It does bring another question, though. In having a discussion with a child, is it appropriate after they've disclosed this information to you to kind of maybe discuss with them, appropriate versus inappropriate behaviors going forward, and maybe take the focus off of what had happened in the past and kind of on living properly and acting, behaving properly in your home?
Yes, I would do that, of course, after they've been at least had the forensic interview piece. But you can, of course, educate all of your children, not just our foster kids, on what is okay and is not okay, and good touches and bad touches. And if somebody touches you in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable or gives you that funny feeling in your tummy, that you want to immediately tell an adult. We need to tell our kids this over and over and over again, because unfortunately, those that hurt our children the most are not strangers. They are people that are known to the kids. They are, unfortunately, the babysitters or the coaches or those who are entrusting relationships to children. So we want to make sure that our kids all know that if they are not okay with a touch, or even if it's someone they see all the time is trying to touch their privates, that they need to tell you right away, and they're not going to get in trouble for telling.
That's good to know. It is sad. It breaks my heart to hear things like that when somebody that, the child's trusting is the one that's taking advantage of them. What do you think foster parents can do? I've heard this come up a lot where, when we go through the MAP training and we understand that, we may get a sexually abused child placed with us, and that there's that fear that we could become the target of an allegation. What is some advice that you would give to foster parents to maybe not have them shy away from these children? Because I know the statistics are great in the number of children who have been sexually abused. So obviously all foster parents can say, no, I'm not going to take a sexually abused child. We'd have nowhere to put these children. But what are some of the things they can do to protect themselves and also help that child and be a good caregiver to the child?
That's a great question. And we definitely need more foster parents like all of you. I would say really being smart in your decisions. For example, if you have a young female child who has been sexually abused by a male relative, then maybe the foster mom is the one in charge of the dressing and the showering and all the bathroom activities, and not the foster dad, just to protect himself. We're also going to maintain really strong boundaries in that home. That means that when people are changing, you're doing it behind closed doors. We're not walking around changing our shirt while we're in a rush to walk into the laundry room to grab the laundry. We're making sure we are always using the bathroom alone. If we're showering, the door is closed. So you're minimizing opportunity for additional inappropriate boundaries. These kids also were very much respecting their space, that if they do not want to be hugged, if they do not want to be, if they don't want help getting changed, we're letting them set their own boundaries, depending on how, the history and the current activities. We might also try that when we're in the room where the child's door is always open, or that we are not in a position where we are helping or touching too much. But I'm hoping that the false allegations don't happen frequently. Because you're really doing such great work to help these kids and give them a sense of security. And even when allegations end up being investigated, my understanding is a lot of the time it is being proven that they are false with the foster parents.
Well, that's another interesting thing, because we hear a lot that the children sometimes, maybe out of a frustration, or maybe they didn't get something they wanted, they might do some type, and it may not even be in a sexual allegation, any kind of an allegation, and then they later recant. And I understand that it's common that kids would recant in these situations quite frequently.
Well, you bring up an interesting point with them with not getting what they want. There are some, and I've treated some, who repeatedly would make allegations because they felt if they got out of enough foster homes, they would eventually end up being placed back with mom. So if they could, and it wasn't even just the allegations, it was just they would behave that outrageously or that defiantly, and they felt if they went through enough placements, they'd get back with mom. So a large piece of that is education, educating them on the process and how it's working. And, making sure that you are doing everything by the books with what you need to do.
That's a good point. I didn't even think of that when I was thinking of the question, but you're right. They probably think that sometimes these extreme behaviors or, allegations could lead to them getting reunified quicker, and that's a good point to bring up, and walking them through the process and helping them understand. When you're working with these children, what is if you could nail it down to just a few simple steps, the most effective things that you're able to do with the children in therapy that you would want to pass along to foster parents to say, if you could do these few things, it would really help them in dealing with their past abuse?
I would say being consistent, trying to follow through, that if you set a schedule that things are going to happen a certain way, actually, trying our hardest to keep that schedule, because that helps them feel secure. For example, with my clients, if I said, okay, I'm going to see you every day at 4, even if things popped up in my schedule, I tried to maintain the appointments for my kids that did have histories of abuse more so than others, just so they could start to trust and feel that adults in their lives were reliable when many in the past have not been, or keeping them abreast of changes when changes have to occur, because at times we can't keep appointments. Also never threatening them that you're going to have them out of your home if some behavior keeps up, because that is going to promote a feeling of uncertainty and not being able to trust you or trust that you're in the environment. And just continue to be caring in that unconditional, positive regard that you might not like a behavior, but you still care greatly about them. And we're working together to overcome some of these behaviors.
Very good information. Have you ever run into a situation where the child is very reluctant, maybe because of some past abuse, to do the visits with the parents? And what would your recommendations be for foster parents, maybe who are supervising those visits where there was some past abuse involved, how they can help maybe bridge the relationship with their parents?
To help the children feel safe during the visits, we want to do the same thing. Try to keep them as consistent as possible. And if we find out the parent has canceled, let them know that as soon as we know. We also, when foster parents are showing up for the visit, we want to make sure that we are being very friendly and positive toward the parent, because the child trusts you. So they're going to be watching you to see how you're interacting with mom or dad. So that's a really big step. If you go in and you're cold or standoffish to the parent, they're going to pick up on that. So even if it's killing you, try to be as friendly and warm as possible. You also might try to plan something special after the visit, so that if it is bringing up a lot of negative emotions or memories of what occurred in the home, have something special planned afterward. Maybe we get to swing by their favorite restaurant for a meal, or we get to swing by one of those great frozen yogurt places, so that we can help them calm down and have a positive treat after. And also when you get home, remind them that they are safe, ask them if there's anything they want to talk about, and acknowledge that it can be really hard to see mom because you miss her, or dad, you miss them so much, but things weren't always happy all the time at home. And just reflecting on the feelings they might have and help normalize those feelings, because it is normal to be both very angry with the parents who hurt them or who didn't stop it when they were being hurt, but also to miss that parent greatly.
Yeah, it is hard for them to deal with those conflicting emotions. Well, we're just about out of time, Dr. Knapp, and so do you have any other parting thoughts or comments about sexual abuse that you think could really benefit the people and the foster parents that are watching the program?
Yes, I want everyone to realize that it is something these kids do frequently overcome, especially when they have consistency and love and solid parenting in their life after it has happened. The children, even those who are sexually acting out and are hurting others, that can be treated. with therapy, with the right type of therapy. And that does not mean these kids are now on a trajectory to be sexually acting out for the rest of their lives. These kids are very lovable, and it's just another way that they are acting out because of life experience or because of the chaos in their life in the past. So I love what you all do, and definitely keep doing it because these kids need you.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. It was a wonderful conversation, and I hope that everybody feels encouraged and has more information to deal with the children in their home, because that is our job here, and our goal is to help everybody in their journey in fostering. And thank you so much. Appreciate your time. And just one last thing, are you going to be posting your contact information so if anybody is local to you that they can get in touch with you and maybe use you for therapy or get other resources?
Sure. We work very closely with ChildNet down in Broward and Palm Beach County, and also with the agencies in Miami. So anyone in South Florida can definitely give us a call if they need anything, or any of you around the state, of course. We're always willing to help.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this. Just a couple of other little announcements and comments I'd like to make. First of all, remember, this show is for you guys, so we're always looking for your thoughts, your comments, your suggestions for upcoming topics. So if you could send us an email, we're going to post the email address here, or of course you can always go on our Facebook page. It's Just in Time Training on Facebook, and post your thoughts and comments there. We would love to hear from you. Also, I'd like to just remind you that we've been posting our episodes, and we have the certificates available for those, so I hope you're getting your continuing education here. We're working on a couple of upcoming webcasts as well, so keep an eye on our website. Remember, we've changed the direct address to www.jitfl.com. That's for justintimeflorida.com. Thanks again for joining us. Thank you again, Dr. Knapp. We appreciated your conversation today and all this helpful information, and we can't wait to see you guys on our next show.